Humans have landed on the moon, built colossal cities in deserts, and even dug tunnels beneath the sea. Yet, one ancient structure continues to perplex the modern world whenever it tries to explain it: the Great Pyramid of Giza.
A colossal stone mass, it has stood for over 4,500 years, defying time and all technical limitations.
A question arises among engineers. If this structure were to be rebuilt in 2026, what would be the cost?
And the most frightening aspect, surprisingly, isn't the money itself.
At first glance, the Great Pyramid of Giza doesn't seem overly complex. It lacks glass, steel, or modern technology.
No intricate details like today's megastructures, just rock, and lots of it. But the closer one looks, the more irrational this construction appears. This could be one of the most illogical structures ever built.
The pyramid was originally 147 meters tall, equivalent to a 40-story modern building. Its base could cover several football fields.
However, the height isn't what troubles engineers the most. The incredible weight of the structure is the true challenge. The entire structure weighs approximately 6 million tons. To put it in perspective, the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, is unlike modern skyscrapers using steel, glass, and optimized materials. The Great Pyramid in the Egyptian desert is almost entirely solid rock.
Approximately 2.3 million stone blocks were used to create it.
Some blocks weigh several tons, while some granite blocks weigh up to 60 tons, or even more.
Each large block is roughly the size of a modern SUV.
The astonishing fact is that these blocks were not merely stacked, they were positioned with an almost unreasonable degree of precision. In many places, the gaps between the blocks are so tiny that it's nearly impossible to insert a thin card. That is what makes this structure truly daunting. The pyramid isn't shocking because of its height.
The modern world can build much taller structures. The mystery lies in how millions of multi-ton blocks were placed with such precision.
The first thing to build isn't the pyramid itself. If we were to rebuild the pyramid today, the first thing would be the ground beneath it. A structure weighing approximately 6 million tons cannot simply be placed on desert sand and expected to remain stable. Just a slight deviation in the foundation could cause the entire structure above to tilt over time. At a height of nearly 147 meters, an error of just a few millimeters at ground level could lead to a very large deviation at the top. Even the Burj Khalifa, weighing about 500,000 tons, required deep foundations and thousands of concrete piles for stability. This structure would still need a foundation tens of meters deep, with thousands of concrete piles driven into the earth to maintain stability. Applying similar logic to the pyramid, the scale of the foundation would become unimaginably colossal. Before even placing the first stone, the entire construction area would need to be scanned with geological sensors, tens of meters deep. Lasers would continuously measure the ground's flatness with near-zero error. GPS-guided bulldozers would work for months,
just to process each small layer of soil.
Then, hundreds of thousands of tons of reinforced concrete would be poured to create a multi-meter thick foundation, capable of bearing the load for thousands of years. It's noteworthy that even the ancient Egyptians failed at this step. The bent pyramid is the most famous example.
During construction, the foundation and angle encountered problems, causing the structure to become unstable.
Engineers at the time were forced to change the construction angle midway to avoid collapse.
As a result, the pyramid has a very strange, broken shape. It remains proof that even ancient Egyptian civilization wasn't always successful.
This makes the question much more disturbing. But the foundation is just the start of the real nightmare. When it comes to rebuilding the Great Pyramid, most people think the biggest challenge would be erecting it. But modern engineers quickly realize the real problem emerges much earlier, even before the first stone is laid.
So, how to produce enough stone? That's the question that makes all calculations terrifying.
The Great Pyramid wasn't made from a few thousand blocks. It required approximately 2.3 million. Just cutting that quantity is a colossal project that almost no construction company in the world has ever faced.
Using current conventional quarrying methods, a large stone cutting factory can process about 100 blocks per day.
Engines, and that's assuming everything works perfectly. To complete the project in about 5 years, as hypothesized, modern society would not a few machines in a small factory, but an entire network of quarries spread across the vast desert.
Imagine hundreds of diamond saws spinning continuously day and night in temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius.
The sound of metal grinding against stone would be incessant for years. The air would be thick with white dust. Industrial cutting blades would heat up so rapidly, and they'd need constant water cooling and regular replacement due to rapid wear. Every few minutes, a multi-ton block would be pulled from the rock face, loaded onto a specialized vehicle, and make way for the next. This is no longer a normal construction site. It's like a colossal, non-stop quarrying operation. Each modern industrial stone cutting system costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just the infrastructure to support stone cutting would incur enormous costs before the pyramid even begins to take shape. But money isn't even the biggest problem. Electricity is what makes the calculations truly insane.
One industrial stone cutter can consume as much electricity as a small residential area.
If 250 machines operate simultaneously for years, the amount of electricity required would be astronomical. To sustain the stone cutting process, a dedicated power supply system would need to be built specifically for the project. And that's when everything starts to get strange. Modern machines are faster, more precise, and virtually tireless. Yet, even with all modern technology, the quantity of stone required for the Great Pyramid remains absurdly large. It's like a structure created not for the logic of the modern world. And cutting the stone is just the beginning. After years of continuous stone cutting, the next problem emerges: how to transport all that stone to the construction site.
Experts believe most of the granite for the ancient Great Pyramid was transported from Aswan, nearly 900 kilometers from Giza.
If the modern world wanted to recreate this project similarly, it would no longer be a normal construction project. It would become one of the largest transport operations ever.
The total weight of stone to be moved is approximately 6 million tons.
A modern heavy-duty truck can carry about 25 to 30 tons per trip. This means hundreds of thousands of continuous truck trips.
For years, just to deliver materials to the construction site.
This means hundreds of thousands of continuous truck trips for years, just to deliver materials to the construction site. If calculated for a 5-year completion, over 100 colossal trucks would leave the quarry daily for Giza. And because the distance is so long, there would always be about 50 trucks operating simultaneously in the desert. But what makes this system terrifying isn't just the number of vehicles, It's that everything is almost not allowed to stop.
Just a few days' delay in the stone supply to the site would begin to affect the entire upper construction schedule.
Cranes would have to wait, workers would wait, and the upper assembly system would be delayed in a chain reaction. This means this transport network would have to operate with almost clockwork precision, like a giant clock, for years on end. That image is so hard to imagine, it almost resembles a post-apocalyptic movie more than a construction project. Day and night, convoys of trucks would stretch across the scorching desert. At night, headlights would form a continuous bright line running through the desert. Engine dust, continuous high temperatures would wear down machinery. Drivers would rotate constantly to keep the transport flow uninterrupted. For years, the Aswan-Giza road would almost never truly be quiet. And of course, all of that costs immense money: fuel, truck maintenance, labor, transport infrastructure, and special transport for super heavy blocks. This would push the total budget up by hundreds of millions of dollars. But the remarkable thing is, even though today's transport technology,
modern humans can transport warships, missiles, or even entire monolithic buildings.
But when applying all these capabilities to this colossal monument, all calculations remain astronomically difficult to comprehend. It's as if this structure was never built according to normal human logic. But the most dangerous thing hasn't appeared yet.
At this point, money, trucks, or quarries are no longer the biggest problem. There's something else that makes even engineers from modern mega projects pause.
When it comes to the Great Pyramid, how to lift multi-ton blocks nearly 147 meters high.
It sounds simple. The modern world has cranes, machinery, and automated systems capable of lifting huge components.
But the deeper you delve into the calculations, the more uncomfortable everything becomes. Because lifting the stone is only half the story. The other half is placing it with almost absolute precision. Some granite blocks in the King's Chamber weigh nearly 80 tons.
A single block is enough to create immense pressure on the entire lifting system. If suspended in the air, just a slight shake or a few centimeters off could devastate the entire area below.
The problem is, such blocks are not at ground level. They are very high up within the structure. Even modern cranes dislike this type of work. The higher the crane lifts, the less stable it becomes. Cost becomes an issue. Shaking occurs. Immense weight creates continuous pressure on the entire load-bearing system. That's why workers at such heights are still considered to be performing one of the most dangerous jobs in modern construction. Now imagine that scene in the middle of the desert. A multi-ton block hanging in the air. Cables stretched to their limit. Workers standing on scaffolding tens of meters high, tiny amidst the giant stone structure. No one speaks much. Only the sound of crane engines and metal screeching under immense weight. The strange thing is, all of this is still not the hardest part.
The hardest part is the precision. The blocks in the Great Pyramid were not placed approximately.
You can't insert a thin card. And this isn't 1 or 2 blocks, it's millions, continuously stacked from base to top.
A small error at the bottom could cause the entire upper layer to shift by tens of centimeters.
And the higher the structure, every small error accumulates in a terrifying way. That's why many engineers believe the most shocking thing
about the pyramid isn't that ancient Egyptians lifted the stone. Modern humans can also lift it. What's almost incomprehensible is how they precisely placed that many huge stones continuously for years without destabilizing the entire structure.
And this is when people start to wonder, how did the ancients truly do it? There's another strange detail when looking at this entire project. The more you calculate, the more you realize modern society's problem isn't necessarily technology. Honestly, if they really wanted to, modern humans could still rebuild the Great Pyramid. Very difficult, extremely costly, but not impossible. The problem is, why do it? No one has a convincing enough answer. Today, almost no project is built solely for belief. Everything must generate profit, serve commerce, or at least prove its worth. A tower must bring economic value. A stadium must generate revenue. Even multi-billion-dollar After years of operation, this monumental structure is completely different. It serves almost no modern logic, generates no cash flow, is not economically optimized, and doesn't solve daily living needs. But thousands of years ago, an entire civilization spent decades, even generations, just to build a giant tomb in the desert.
That sounds very hard to understand with today's mindset.
But for ancient Egyptians, this wasn't just a structure. It was about divine belief and their view of existence after life. The pharaoh wasn't just a king. In the eyes of many, they were a bridge between humans and the divine. And a structure that could last thousands of years wasn't a waste. It was a necessity. Perhaps that's why the biggest gap between modern society and ancient Egyptians isn't in machinery, but in how they thought about time. We build for a few decades. They built for thousands of years. And perhaps that is the most powerful thing the ancients ever possessed.
Angles. If you add up all the costs from the foundation, stone cutting, transportation, cranes, and labor, up to the...
And that's still a relatively optimistic calculation. It doesn't include taxes, rising electricity costs, machinery maintenance, accident risks, or delays.
Which are almost certain to occur in a project lasting nearly a decade in a harsh desert environment.
What's remarkable is that the modern world actually has enough money for that. Palm Jumeirah cost billions just to create an artificial palm-shaped island in the sea.
SoFi Stadium, one of the most expensive stadiums on the planet, also cost a similar amount.
There are also other mega oil and gas projects, future cities, and other colossal structures with even larger budgets.
In other words, if they truly wanted to, modern humanity could completely gather enough resources to rebuild the Great Pyramid. But almost no one wants to do that.
It's not because of a lack of technology, nor a lack of money.
But because even in modern times, this project still feels too extreme, too large, too costly. And almost no one finds what the modern world considers reasonable. And that is the biggest shock. All those colossal figures are just to rebuild something that ancient Egyptians completed over 4,500 years ago, without internal combustion engines, without GPS, without modern cranes, or computer-aided structural calculation systems. Just stone, humans, and a scale that even today's modern world still has to pause and recalculate from scratch. Modern humans have AI, supercomputers, satellites, and machines capable of lifting hundreds of tons of steel into the air. We can build artificial islands in the ocean, erect skyscrapers that almost touch the clouds, and observe planets millions of kilometers from Earth.
But the strange thing is, the more developed we become, the more incomprehensible the Great Pyramid becomes, instead of easier to explain.
Every time engineers try to recalculate how these structures were built, they almost always arrive at the same feeling.
Not impossible, but unbelievably irrational. Because the more one looks at the volume of stone, the precision, and the scale of transportation,
the harder it is to accept that everything was completed over 4,500 years ago. Perhaps that's why, after thousands of years, the Great Pyramid is not just an ancient wonder. It's like a giant question in the desert, but that thousands of years later, humanity still doesn't truly understand how they did it.